Hello, beautiful souls. This is Maria Lupita Gurule, and I want to continue the conversation we started yesterday about soul contracts and difficult soul agreements. And the very specific example that was brought up is the agreement that could possibly be happening between Petito and Landry right now. So that is the case of the young missing woman whose boyfriend is now being sought after. So let's talk about that. That was a specific example. So the first thing that we need to have an understanding before this deeper conversation can be had is to understand that this very real 3D world that we are all part of right now, where this transmission is coming through in this very real way, I'm alive and in this body, very real. But also, this is also finite. This is also temporary. This is also the, I don't want to say lesser because it is not lesser. This is a material world of the energy world. That this is finite and we will go away. This part of us that when our body ceases to exist here will continue in the spirit outside of this physical body. We do not need a physical body to be in existence. Our consciousness will exist, that spark of us that animates us while in these bodies, in this 3D world, will continue after. So what happens to us is very, very real here. It is felt so palpable. That is why we struggle to call this an illusion, because it's not an illusion. And the hardest part is to really fully understand what it is. So if we can imagine that the level of technology that we have right now includes holographic 3-dimensional video games where we can now put on these goggles and submerge ourselves into a whole other reality that feels very real. Now, I've seen some really silly videos with people putting these devices on that are engaged in that imaginary superimposed world, and they run into walls because their physical bodies are in a different place than what they're actually seeing inside of their mind's eye. That is the level of technology that is available, and the very similar thing happens to us. It is like we ourselves are playing this game, and our bodies are these avatars that we are moving around. And when we pass, when this physical body of mine ceases to exist in this very real 3D world, when I had my NDE, I wasn't in it. My body ceased to exist. My pulse stopped. My heart stopped. My lungs stopped. And in that moment, that spark of me, that consciousness went to the other side. From whence we originate, we come from there. That is where we originally are and are from. That is the real part of us, because that part will exist beyond this body. That part existed before this body, exists through this body during this time that I'm here, while simultaneously there, complicated, I know, but will also continue to exist even after. That's why this is considered the illusion, because when this stops, but the game isn't over. The game, it doesn't end. And I hate to call it a game because it's not to play light of the things that are happening. It is only an analogy to use that can best describe what this world is. It feels very real. While we're in it, it is real. The emotions are real. The sensations are real. The physical things that we experience are real. And while simultaneously will dissipate into an experience in a memory recorded in all of time, while we still continue. Complicated stuff. So That's why I wanted to make sure that there's a level of understanding and a foundation before we can start building. So that's a big concept to really fully grasp, that what happens here doesn't mean it's game over for us. We still go to the other side. We come out of it thinking like, oh my God, how in the world did I just survive that? And then we recover from it, acclimate and integrate all of the knowledge and the wisdom from it so that we can incorporate it into our being and then begin to plan the next. Okay. It's like learning multiple topics. And it's totally doable and possible. And that's how it goes. So when we have really difficult contracts, contracts that include agreements that are hard, my contract included several agreements that were really hard, but those agreements are the ones that I learned the most from. Now, as a child, we can't say that a child fully has awareness and chooses the experience. While in the human body and we're going through it, of course we don't. So for those of us who have experienced physical abuse, mental abuse, child abuse, sexual violence, other violences, those are the things that we've all experienced. Those are things that were written within our contracts, but those are also the things that created the being that we are. I learned very early on how to read energy and how to protect myself and how to be very leery of others who were not very truthful. That came from experiences that were not good. I also learned how to compartmentalize. I also learned how to detach from my body and be able to astral plane, be able to go into other realms, to disconnect from traumas. So those are things that I learned out of that I would never wish upon another, but I know also created and molded me. It also gave me a deep-seated understanding of the human condition so that I can experience it firsthand, because there's very few things that I myself have not experienced that the things that you all have. Now, I might sit here and it might sound like the things I talk about are very easy. And people might say, well, that sounds like it's all easy for her. Look how good and easy she has it. That wasn't always the case. I am here today because of the problems that I occurred before, that I learned from the difficult experiences, from the difficult people in my life. I don't wish it upon another. But I also understand how those experiences helped shape and mold me, how they've also made me a vessel for interrupting and breaking intergenerational traumas. Because when we heal it within ourself, we also heal it for generations past and generations forward, as well as within our past and in our future and in our lineage. So there's a lot of healing that happens and takes place when we are able to go through this. The second part of it also is to understand a greater level, is that that might be a soul agreement within two people, but within that is a soul agreement with a multitude of other souls. So I'm going to use an entirely different example and make it very real. Years ago, when I was young, I watched a made-for-television documentary, or a made-for-television, not so much documentary, but a movie about Adam. And it had to do with John Walsh's son, Adam Walsh, a young boy who was abducted and atrocities made. A young boy who was, I hate to be so graphic, but this young boy was found decapitated, and they tried to understand how in the world was this possible when this young boy was abducted. Adam Walsh. And his father, John Walsh, created America's Most Wanted. From that atrocity of those two souls, that young boy, who as a soul and as a young boy in the human body, of course, did not choose that horrific event. To think about it boggles the mind. To have a soul agreement with a horrific other soul that would create such atrocities, but the bravery in it and the outcome of it has sent a ripple through space and time. that without that event would have obliterated an entire timeline where it has solved and saved hundreds of thousands of other people from that one horrific event. John Walsh created America's Most Wanted, and as of March 2021, there was 1,187 fugitives that were caught because of that television show. And he created that television show to prevent other people from experiencing the pain that he himself went through. Because of that, now that comes full circle. That now John Walsh, who created America's Most Wanted, is now stepping forward to be able to help in the Petito and Landry case. Laundry case, I'm probably not saying it correctly. But this now comes full circle where these two souls, Petito and Landry, are now has the entire country enthralled into this event. Her body was found in Wyoming. Wyoming is a North American state that has a lot of tribal communities in it. So what is the purpose and how could something so horrific even possibly be? How could souls agree to something so horrific? So it would require a grand soul, huge, magnificent, powerful soul to come incarnate into a small body, to have an experience that would send into motion an entire ripple that changes the course of history, where one soul's bravery has changed the entire course of history that is now visiting upon us again, and where now John Walsh has committed to also helping find, at least get answers of what happened from Landry when he's caught. So here Petito, she experienced this horrific event for the soul's growth. And how could a soul even possibly choose that? Well, if we stop and take a look at the interworkings of all of the souls. So using the example that I gave with Adam Walsh, brave, massive soul, small body, completely changing the course of history. That if he had not had that bravery, that one soul, again, how many, not just the 1,187 fugitives that were caught, but imagine how much destruction they would have continued to cause had they not been caught. And the ripple effect from generations and all of those things. So it's a far, far further reaching effect than we can possibly imagine. So here's little Adam Walsh from ages ago, having had that horrific experience, who sets into motion this ripple of time that also has agreements with those 1,187 fugitives. Because if he did not experience that, then that would not have set into motion John Walsh, which would have not set into motion America's Most Wanted, which would have not set into motion the hundreds of thousands of Americans watching those shows, offering up their service to provide and catch those negative people. That was a massive positive thing that has come about from a horrific thing. So now with Petito, experiencing this horrific thing has brought to light a massive, massive, necessary, important issue that has now come to the forefront because she was well known, because of her race and her gender, and because of the different social media platforms that she has been afforded. There's now recognition through social media platforms. And if you've been watching closely and watching enough and watching through the lines, you will also know and be familiar with Wyoming having indigenous peoples, having other cultures of the Native Americans who are experiencing such atrocities. The missing of indigenous women is of the most horrific right now, and it is under the circuit and not spoken. So from 2011 up until September, I believe, of 2020, The University of Wyoming conducted a study of statistics and surveys that 710 people, indigenous people, were missing. And some of them were duplicated. So I believe there was like 1,200 and some reports of missing indigenous people. And of those, the statistics that are young women is incredible. And only 18% of that received any media coverage whatsoever. Now, I live in the state of New Mexico, and the the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, was a congresswoman. She is the first Native American to be in a secretary position within the government. And she has dedicated her efforts also to bring awareness of the missing and indigenous women. So what could possibly Petito's effect have in the world? Well, she's having a massive effect in the world. That massive, powerful soul that was willing to come into this human body to have this horrific event happen, where from it has begun the stirrings of massive good. It happened in Wyoming, and so many other indigenous women of her same age and of similar location in that state have also gone missing, but received not even a fraction, not even an inclination of the attention that is being received right now. And why? So what if part of her soul's agreement was to bring awareness of this, because there is a great imbalance that is existing, and the universe wants nothing greater than to bring things into balance and in harmony and in unity, because that is flow. When things are not in flow, there's always a desire to bring things back into balance. Just like a flowing river that is blocked, it's always going to find another way. So if these young, indigenous, beautiful women that are the exact same age as Petito are also being abducted and trafficked, sex trafficked, murdered, all sorts of different atrocities that are possibly being done, but no attention being given whatsoever. How do you think that the universe would want to bring things back into balance and bring things into awareness so that there can be the balance? We may not be aware, and this is a horrific way for it to have occurred. And we would hope that as humans, we would get the message in another way. But as I've mentioned, pain is the greatest motivator. So when we are all moved by the pain we are seeing, now we have a willingness to step up and do something about it. Now there is greater awareness of what is actually happening in the state of Wyoming with so many young women. It also brings to mind another level of understanding and awareness. That's one facet of it. And I just want to bring to mention again that Congressman Deb Haaland has actually done a lot of great works. And last year that she signed into law, Savannah's Law, which has everything to do with the help and the hope that there will be assistance for Indigenous people to be able to find and seek help for their loved ones who are also missing. Where there is all this nationwide media with hundreds and thousands of dollars being spent in effort of this. May there be at least one small portion of that attributed to all of those Indigenous women who are now still missing. 710 Indigenous people in the state of Wyoming. Not all of them Indigenous women, but the good majority of them. I believe it was 87%, if I'm not mistaken. And again, it's a study that was done by the University of Wyoming. So I'll put that reference in there so we can actually look at those so we get the numbers correct. This is just for discussion's sake. So we can imagine that that is just the state of Wyoming. Now, I live in the state of New Mexico, where there are, over 20 pueblos We have the Navajo Nation. We have other tribal communities. And so this runs really deep. That my great grandmother on my mother's side was also indigenous and also received, part of the history of the atrocities that are happening to indigenous women that have been happening for the last 500 years. So soul contracts, soul agreements. Imagine the soul agreements that are bound to everything that is happening right now with Petito. If they apply one fraction of the energy and effort that is being supported right now in this effort that is given to Indigenous women, imagine programs that can be created, awarenesses that can be given so that this can be prevented and hopefully solved, and others can be brought to justice, just like in America's Most Wanted. Wouldn't that be amazing if there was something that gave such energy and effort towards those missing Indigenous, like America's Most Wanted? Who's to say what's going to come of this? Because of the awareness that this brought in, it would not be happening had she had not had the courage to go through that. And again, the second part of it is all the social media pieces. Young adults are being extremely affected by social media, and that there is a disconnect. There is a schism, a disconnect of what is being portrayed on social media versus what actually is being experienced. And so as we look and see those images, we see them joyful, enjoying each other's company, but the backstory is much different. May we learn ourselves how to be authentic in all conditions and circumstances. That just because I'm here in a public face does not mean I am portraying one part of myself while living an entire another. That may all parts of myself be in full alignment, and may I be transparent. May we also teach that skill to young people, that they are worthy and enough within themselves just as they are, even in their pain and their hurts and their anxieties, without having to just be fake book, without having to portray something that isn't real, that could be really helpful and of deep service to so many people, to just show up as real, as ourselves. We all might want a particular life. May we live it authentically and then create the changes that we need inside to authentically live it so that there isn't a schism. So some of the things that we've seen is like what looks to be an emotional breakthrough, because it's really difficult to try to maintain a certain outward portrayal when inside isn't in alignment with it. So that is another layer that could potentially come out from this. And it amazes me that no one's speaking of it just yet. So may we, sorry, I'm outdoors, so there's a lot of little critters, flies. Let's not sweat the small stuff. Let's pick our battles. Let's understand and know what our triggers and our little aggravations are. Work through them and heal them, be willing to share them, because if one of us is feeling it, everybody else is feeling it. Be authentic, show up ourselves. If every one of us was willing to do that, this situation could have possibly been avoided. When we're not trying to portray something, we're just allowing ourselves to be. Be authentic, be real in your pain, share your pain, and that could help everybody else. So deep conversation, complicated when we're talking about soul agreements in a really deeper way. So again, thank you for allowing me to just ramble on. I pray that it has come back full circle with all these different strands and tapestries, because that's really what these are. These are interweavings of understandings where we actually bring them all together to be able to create a big picture to hopefully have better understanding. And so my hope is to be able to bring these things that I have been glimpsed and shown and have understanding not only from my near-death experience, but applying these things that I have come to understand afterwards, the things that I've learned about living through dying. So thank you so much for allowing. I hope that this has opened up greater understanding. And I really do appreciate the questions. So it gives me a gauge of how to address further content and how to further expand upon the information. So thank you so much. May you all just breathe. Sometimes just breathing is enough. So breathe. Thank you so much.